This is not going well. Hello everybody, my name is Sarah. Welcome back. Today I am very excited for this video because I am going to be ranking all of Jane Austen's novels. As you may know if you have been following me here for a while, in the last couple of months I have read all of Jane Austen's books and I love every single one of them. I need to make this very clear in the beginning of this video. I love all of them so much. None of them is bad. There is no such thing as a bad Jane Austen novel, but I just wanted to, you know, give my full thoughts about all of them and talk about what I love about all of them because I love so many things, and I just thought that it would be fun to rank them and kind of like, you know, torture myself a little bit. So this is what we are going to be doing in today's video. There are going to be a little bit of spoilers for all of the books. Nothing plot-wise. I'm mainly going to be talking about some of the love interests that I really love. So if you do consider that to be spoilery, then be aware of that. Personally, I didn't really mind knowing who the character was going to end up with at the beginning because I think the most important thing is how they get there. But if that is something that you consider to be a spoiler, just be aware. If I'm talking about a book that you haven't read, maybe just skip ahead until I put the book down. So without any further ado, let's begin! Okay, so for the first two books, you're actually going to have to forgive me because I don't really know which one is number 6 and which one is number 5, obviously, because I love all of them so much. It was really hard to like give one of them the last spot on this list. So the first book that I want to talk about is Mansfield Park. Fanny Price's rich relatives offer her a place in their home so that she can be properly brought up. However, Fanny's childhood is a lonely one as she is never allowed to forget her position. Her only ally is her cousin, Edmund. When her cousins befriend two glamorous new young people who have arrived in the area, Henry and Mary Crawford, Edmund starts to grow close to Mary and Fanny finds herself dealing with feelings she has never experienced before. I feel like a lot of people don't like Mansfield Park because they don't really like Fanny Price, but I actually really love her, okay? I'm different. I think Fanny is actually a very interesting character. I know that a lot of people think that she's boring because she is not as self-confident as other Jane Austen heroines, but I personally really love that about her. I love that she grows so much throughout this novel, considering the fact that she's growing up around people who all think themselves pretty much very superior to her. I think it's definitely normal that she is not as confident in herself, but I do really like her shy and quiet personality. The thing that bugged me a little bit about Mansfield Park, and once again that is like super minor, but that is the length of the novel. I think that this one is a little bit too long, some parts dragged a little bit, and once we got to the ending I was just so ready for all of these characters to finally be happy. However, this one is definitely full of juicy moments that are absolutely worth it. Not only are all of the side characters pretty terrible people, which makes them very entertaining, like they all hate Fanny so much and they're all just such snubs, and it's just so funny to read about them because they're completely ridiculous, and also they get Fanny tangled up in all of their rich people shenanigans, which I think was super fun to read about. And also Fanny, like, she doesn't want to be into those situations and she's just trying to navigate them, which I think was super interesting. I was rooting for her from start to finish, and honestly I always got pretty angry on her behalf because Jane Austen really said rich people are trash with this one, and honestly it was wild. The love story in this one is also definitely pretty cute, but also they're cousins, so we're just going to ignore that. But yeah, I love the love interest in this one. I think he was pretty cute, a little bit naive at some parts, but I think that just makes him even more endearing. And also I just love that he was the only one literally not treating her like trash. So, you know, I want to share all of my favorite quotes from all of these novels. So the one that I chose for Mansfield Park is, "There will be little rubs and disappointments everywhere, and we are all apt to expect too much. But then, if one scheme of happiness fails, human nature turns to another. If the first calculation is wrong, we make a second better. We find comfort somewhere." Mansfield Park is definitely for you if you love triangles or squares or pentagons, and also if you love a good character development and rich people being completely ridiculous. Then the next one I want to talk about is Sense and Sensibility. Eleanor is as prudent as her sister Marianne is impetuous. Each must learn from the other after they are forced by their father's death to leave their home and enter into the contests of polite society. The charms of unsuitable men and the schemes of rival ladies mean that their paths to success are fraught with disappointment, but together they attempt to find a way to happiness. So once again, I'm not really sure between Mansfield Park and Sense and Sensibility which one is number 5 and which one is number 6, because I love them both, but like some minor things kind of annoyed me in both of them. And for Sense and Sensibility is the fact that I was kind of disappointed with the ending. I really loved Eleanor, our main character, who is the older sister, and I was really annoyed by Marianne, who is the youngest one, and she basically spends all of her time crying and being dramatic. I think that the contrast between the two of them, however, was very interesting, and I also really loved how Jane Austen explored their relationship and how they both learned from each other. That being said, it's the romance that kind of irked me, because I was really shipping Eleanor with the gentleman who Marianne ends up with. So I was kind of annoyed because I felt that these two characters were just perfect for each other, and then Jane Austen was just like, nope. On top of that, Eleanor's love interest wasn't really doing it for me. I think he's like the most boring Jane Austen love interest, if I can say so. Maybe that's a little bit too shady, but yeah, I just didn't love him that much, and the other guy was just so interesting and so sweet and kind and smart, and I was just like, but why? Why does he have to end with Marianne, who is literally the most like overly dramatic girl ever? I mean, I'm saying that, but I'm also the most overly dramatic person, so you know, it's fine. I can say it because I'm pretty much the same. And don't even get me started on Marianne's love life, because oh my god, this was a whole mess. To be honest, this one is definitely the one that kept me the most on my toes, because that plot was filled with twists that I never saw coming, and everybody was just acting so crazy and reckless, and I was just like, Jane Austen, what is going on? I was clutching my pearls. I couldn't deal. I have two favorite quotes for this one, because one of them is just too sassy and I needed to share it because it is definitely a very good example of Jane Austen's witty writing, and then the second one is just very sweet. So the sweet one is, I wish, as well as everybody else, to be perfectly happy, but like everybody else, it must be in my own ways. And then the funny one is when Eleanor is at this party and there's this like very stupid guy who's talking to her, and Jane Austen just says, Eleanor agreed to it all, for she did not think he deserved the compliment of rational opposition. So overall, like I said, even if this book is like number 5 or 6 on my list, I really loved Sense and Sensibility. It has a crazy plot, a great protagonist, and also so much drama at the pianoforte. Like, so much drama. Then coming in at number 4, we have Persuasion. 8 years ago, Anne Elliot bowed to pressure from her family and made the decision not to marry the man she loved, Captain Wentworth. Now circumstances have conspired to bring him back into her social circle, and Anne finds her old feelings for him reignited. However, when they meet again, Wentworth behaves as if they are strangers and seems more interested in her friend Louisa. In this, her final novel, Jane Austen tells the story of a love that endures the tests of time and society with humor, insight, and tenderness. Persuasion is the kind of novel that you are going to really like if you love yearning and staring at your crush from across the room and swiftly looking away when they look back, and also long walks on the beach. I definitely loved the main protagonist in this one too. Anne is actually Jane Austen's eldest main character, and it definitely shows. I feel like she is very calm and composed, and I really love that about her. She has a very calming presence. I love that this one follows kind of this old romance that gets rekindled. It's kind of like a second chance romance with a lot of heart palpitation and yearning and just very awkward characters that don't really know what to do with themselves. It's full of will they, won't they, and full of hope, and I was really feeling for those characters every single time they're together in the same room. They're just so awkward and shy because they're both just so composed, but when they see each other, it's like their heart completely melts, and It's just so sweet. I definitely think that this is one of Jane Austen's most serious novels, and also the atmosphere in this one is amazing because we spent a lot of the novel in this kind of like beach town, so it's just very fun, and they're always walking on the beach and everything just sounds so beautiful and kind of like whimsical. So yeah, I really love that about this one. I think one of my favorite quote is definitely when Anne is talking to this gentleman, and they're both talking about like human nature and the difference between men and women, and at some point this gentleman, whose name I don't recall, says, "I do not think I ever opened a book in my life which had not something to say upon woman's inconstancy. Songs and proverbs all talk of woman's fickleness, but perhaps you will say these were all written by men." To which Anne replies, "Perhaps I shall. Yes, if you please, no reference to examples in books. Men have had every advantage of us in telling their own story. Education has been theirs in so much higher degree. The pen has been in their hands. I will not allow books to prove anything." Jane Austen wrote this over 100 years before Virginia Woolf wrote A Room of One's Own. Do you know how incredibly spectacular that is? I remember reading this and just sitting there being completely flabbergasted because I was just like, oh my god, like this is revolutionary for her time period. This is absolutely crazy, and I just love her so much. Then entering the top 3, we have Northanger Abbey, which I would actually recommend as your first Jane Austen novel if you want a starting point. Catherine Morland is a young girl with a very active imagination. Her entry into the fashionable social scene in Bath results in an invitation to stay with new friends at Northanger Abbey, but Catherine's naivety and love of sensational novels lead to embarrassing and entertaining consequences. As it says in the little synopsis, Catherine, the main character, has a wild imagination, and I think that is why she's one of the most relatable and also entertaining heroine. I think she's definitely one of the funniest Jane Austen main characters because she is just such a big fan of Gothic novels, and she kind of sees the world through that lens, which is just so funny and fun, and also gets her into a lot of trouble. I really loved how Jane Austen talked about the most popular books of her time in this one, and also kind of makes fun of them in the best way possible. Actually, talking about books, my favorite quote of this one is when Catherine, Henry, her love interest, and also his sister are talking about what they love to read, and Catherine says, "I read history books a little as a duty, but it tells me nothing that does not either vex or weary me. The quarrels of popes and kings with wars or pestilences in every page, the men all so good for nothing and hardly any woman at all. It is very tiresome, and yet I often think it odd that it should be so dull, for a great deal of it must be invention." Once again, I don't really annotate my books, but I just wanted to highlight this quote like over 1,000 times because this is so significant, and it really shows how smart Jane Austen was and how well she understood the period in which she was living and all of the challenges that women had to face, not only in their day-to-day life but also in their representation. And she understood that like history is created by men, and it's just, oh my god, it's so good! But coming back to the characters and the plot, I want to talk about the main love interest, Henry, because I thought that he was just so kind and sweet, but also very smart. And we all know I love a nerd, soft boy, so yeah, he was definitely one of my favorites. I think that the relationship between him and Catherine was very sweet because they're both super naive and innocent, but he also brings her down to earth when her imagination is running completely wild, which I really did appreciate. I think the plot of this one is definitely the most fast-driven one out of all of Jane Austen's novels, so that is why I think that a beginner would really love it. It's just so much fun, and we're really jumping from one adventure and one gossip to the other. There's an old spooky abbey, some characters that you're not sure that you can trust, and Catherine's crazy personality, so this one was definitely a lot of fun. Okay, so coming in at number 2, I can't believe we're already there. We have Pride and Prejudice. Elizabeth Bennet is young, clever, and attractive, but her mother is a nightmare and she and her four sisters are in dire need of financial security and escape. The arrival of affable Mr. Bingley and arrogant Mr. Darcy in the neighborhood, both single and in possession of large fortunes, turns all their lives upside down in this witty drama of friendship, rivalry, enmity, and love. Obviously, I adore this book, and I will always adore it, and I will always adore Elizabeth, who is, I think, one of the most amazing female characters of all time, if not one of the best characters of all time, regardless of gender, because she is absolutely incredible. Lizzie is just the best. She is so smart, she is so witty, she is such a savage in the best way possible, but she's also very sweet and kind and caring on the inside, and if you love books as much as she loves them, you obviously love her even more. And then, of course, we have the relationship between her and Darcy, which is also one of the most iconic relationships in all of literature. I love that they're just both so angsty and they also yearn for each other, but they hate each other, and they learn so much throughout this book from each other, which I think is just one of the most amazing things about this book. It's super satisfying and also very beautiful to me, and also they're the OG hate to love couple, so there's that. Darcy as a character is also very, very dear to me. I used to not like him when I was younger. I used to think that he was just mean and stupid, but honestly, the more that I watched the 2005 adaptation, which is my favorite movie of all time, and also while rereading this one, I slowly understood that he is very rude, but he's also completely socially awkward and he doesn't know anything about people. He's just a big softie underneath it all, and that is why I love him and Elizabeth so much, because they're just so complex. And honestly, all of Jane Austen's characters are. The other side characters in this one are also some of my favorites because they're all just so funny and endearing, or you just love to hate them so much. I mean, we can all agree that Lydia is probably the worst Jane Austen character of all time. She is terrible. We all want to push her down a cliff, but also we just love to hate her. This one also holds a very, very special place in my heart because, as you may know, this is the one that started it all. I started reading Jane Austen books at the beginning of quarantine, at the beginning of this year, and they just have been such a comfort to me. And in that time, I was just so stressed about everything, about the world being literally on fire, and so reading this book was just such a comfort, and I was just so happy to escape with all of those characters in this very, very sweet and beautiful world in which everything always ends well. And honestly, I'm just so happy that Elizabeth and Darcy sent me on my Jane Austen journey. I think that one of my favorite quotes from this book is one very iconic Lizzie quote, but I also have to mention that my favorite quote from the movie is the Darcy love declaration when they're in the field and he says to Elizabeth, "You have bewitched me, body and soul, and I love you." Like this, if somebody ever crosses a field at dawn and tells me that, they're gonna be able to put a ring on it. I don't care. But from the book, my favorite quote definitely has to be what Lizzie says when Mr. Darcy proposes to her for the first time and it all goes completely wrong. "From the very beginning, from the first moment, I may almost say, of my acquaintance with you, your manners, impressing me with the fullest belief of your arrogance, your conceit, and your selfish disdain of the feelings of others, were such as to form the groundwork of disapprobation on which succeeding events have built so immovable a dislike, and I had not known you a month before I felt that you were the last man in the world whom I could ever be prevailed on to marry." I don't think that I can read this quote without screaming about how iconic it is. But let's be real, the entirety of this book is iconic from beginning to end, and I couldn't tell you which of these scenes is my favorite because I love all of them with all of my heart. They just make me so happy because they're just so funny and sweet and endearing and just absolute perfection. This book is perfect. And then finally, as you may have guessed, my favorite Jane Austen novel is Emma. Emma is young, rich, and independent. She has decided not to get married and instead spends her time organizing her acquaintances' love affairs. Her plans for the matrimonial success of her new friend Harriet, however, lead her into complications that ultimately test her own detachment from the world of romance. Emma was definitely a surprise for me. I did not expect to love it that much, but wow, did it make me feel a wild range of emotions. I feel like people often argue about whether Emma is a better character than Elizabeth or if Elizabeth is actually the best, but I honestly love them both so much and pretty much equally because of how different they are. Emma is definitely more flawed than Elizabeth and also a little bit less lovable because she has this like big ego thing going for her, and I think personally that it makes her very funny and cheeky, but I was not expecting that under all of that she is actually pretty vulnerable and she cares very, very much. There was a moment when she was thinking about love and what it means to her because she never wants to marry and all of that, and she wants to find the right person for her who is going to make her happy, and I just started crying because of how relatable what she was thinking was for me, and that was definitely a moment, let me tell you. Also, speaking of marriage, her habit of matchmaking is absolutely hilarious to me. I know that a lot of people think that she is very manipulative, which she definitely is. Let's not try to hide that. She's definitely manipulative, but also at the end of the day, she is just trying to make people happy, and also obviously because she wants to have all of the credit. I also really love to see her grow throughout this novel and also try to fix all of the mistakes that she's making because she definitely makes a few. The relationship between Emma and Mr. Knightley is also one of my favorites because it's just so good. You see them being so close and yet so oblivious of their feelings, and then at the same time they realize how much they love each other even if they bicker all the time, and I just think that it's just such a good and complex relationship because they're both friends and they're both like not too sure of the other's feelings while also both being completely madly in love with the other. And I really, really love Mr. Knightley, and I definitely think that he's underrated because he's just so thoughtful and kind and sweet, but he also doesn't shy away from telling Emma when he thinks that she's doing something wrong. The respect that they have for each other even when they're disagreeing about something or how much they care about each other just made me so, so happy and really showed how complex they are. I also always say that one of my favorite parts of every single Jane Austen book is all of the other side characters and how completely ridiculous they all are. And the ones that we have in Emma just made me giggle the entire time, from her father to Mrs. Bates to Mr. Elton, who is just the worst, but we also just love to hate him. They're all completely hilarious and completely over the top in the best way possible, and that's why I think Emma is definitely one of the funniest Jane Austen novels, but it's also very intricate and a very, very good character study, so it's a whole roller coaster. My favorite quote from Emma is one of Mr. Knightley's very, very popular quote, which I know is super like basic of me, but honestly it just destroys me every single time and it sums up my feelings so perfectly. And that quote is when he says, "If I loved you less, I might be able to talk about it more." I just can't even begin to explain how perfect this quote is. It just says everything in such a simple and beautiful way. It makes my heart melt but also ache, and Jane Austen has so many amazing quotes that I love so, so much, but I think that this one has to be my favorite. So yeah, Emma is just one of those novels that has perfect scene after perfect scene and such flawed character that you can't help but love because of how human they are, and it made me laugh and cry at the same time, and it's just so wonderful, so that's why it is my favorite. Alright, so there y'all have it. That was my Jane Austen ranking. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know down below which one is your favorite Jane Austen novel, and do you have some unpopular opinions you want to share, or do you agree with certain things that I've said, or do you think I'm completely wrong? I just love Jane Austen so much and I want to gush about her with all of you. Also, stay tuned if you want to see more Jane Austen content from me because it is definitely coming. So don't forget to subscribe if you love this video and if you want to hear me scream about Jane Austen some more, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!